ISD, and then when Rod moved to Clarkston, he had a conversation with Lauren. Actually, no, I guess Adam's the next person, right? So Adam came up to the work we were doing in Saginaw, and Adam had already learned about the ideas and had already actually started on his own at Way Elementary, beginning to put some of the ideas of visible thinking in place. Again, of that conversation. Then Lauren next, so Rod kind of having the conversation with Adam and Rod all together with Lauren about how we might take these ideas on a larger scale across Oakland County. And then Nancy Mahoney working in Clarkston is one of the first cohorts that we did with the Oakland County kind of cohorts, the first kind of leadership cohort that was, we did our first round of seminars actually in Clarkston. Nancy was a part of that and has been a real kind of torchbearer in Clarkston in terms of moving those ideas forward. So this is a chance for kind of questions for the panel, but before we kind of move into questions, maybe just kind of go down the line, and as I was talking earlier about those 4 areas of attention, or as you think about kind of what you've done, what's really resonated for you has really been important and really been significant in terms of moving kind of the idea of a culture thinking forward based on your roles and where you're at. So Laura, do you want to
Sure.
share something?
So I would start with that idea that we started to connect the dots between individual experiences that we had and how could we take this to a larger conversation in Oakland County. And I remember from one of the very early conversations that we wanted it to very much be owned by the districts, that this was a collaborative among the districts, and that the ISD was a partner in all of that, and that it would be hosted and shared around the county. And I think we continue to strive to aim toward that, but the reality was that the ISD offered some resources like event management for registration and coordination of spaces and dates and rooms and those kinds of things. So that became the role that I sort of lived into. And as we started by bringing Ron in for a one-day overview and an invitation to the whole county. And after that one-day introduction said, if you're interested and would like to do more professional learning around this, there will be opportunities the following fall. And collectively then we designed these original foundations opportunities. And speaking to the shepherding of change and the dragons, what really stood out to me in those early design meetings was how do we build this differently so that it's leadership development, that it will foster the kind of shepherding change that Ron has just laid out for us this afternoon, and build that capacity over time so that we designed opportunities that started small and really were about leadership development to grow the conversation back in your schools. And so that's how the original seminar started, and then how did those people come to additional professional learning about leadership, the big ideas around making thinking visible and cultures of thinking, but seeing themselves as leaders of that learning back in their own settings and growing that work over time. And the reference to the tours piece, which was a way to help people see what's possible, really grew from the connection to Way, because they were already opening their doors and doing open houses. So I, at the ISD as party planner, said, okay, let's take that to scale. And as people start to do this, and I hunch, if I remember right, Nancy in Springfield Plains was one of the next early tours opportunities for people to come see what does that look like. And so it's, again, started with sort of what already existed and how do we begin to open up more opportunities for people to see what's possible, have a conversation, start with their own practice, with a mindset of being a leader in that at whatever scale seemed appropriate for them. So I'll stop there for now.
So I guess, just building on what Lauren said, when we worked with Ron previously, I think we learned that we really needed the leaders of the buildings involved and to stay involved and to be the leaders of learning in their schools. And so having Ron and Lauren start out with the leaders in our schools was really very, very important. And to have the leaders keep coming back with teacher leaders and spread those ideas around. And then I think what I've always found really compelling about Ron's work is that it's very personally meaningful to me. It really resonated with who I am as a person, as a thinker and a learner, and that I'm trying to be authentic in what I do as a leader, and to model and to just be who I am. And I always learn every time, I get to be with Ron and with other Project Zero educators and with the people who are up here with me. I continue to learn, and these ideas continue to grow. And then I just try to always think about, just like we're here today, there are a lot of things we can't control in schools, but we can control the environment. We can control how it feels to be a learner. We can control the messages we send and what we value, what we model, the language we use. All those cultural forces, we can really, we can control those things, and I think when we're conscious of them, we really create and then recreate and reinforce the environment for learning, and it becomes something that perpetuates itself over time, because you hear it from teachers, you hear it from kids, you hear it from parents, and then it's growing and it's evolving, and it's not just your idea or something you read in a book, but it's something that has affected people personally and deeply, and it'll affect them for a long time, as Ron talks about the learners we're trying to affect for their lifetime, not just while they're with us in school. So this is very personally meaningful to me, and I just feel tremendously honored to be part of it, and I feel obligated to try to continue to have kids experience education in this way.
And I would just continue to connect with what both they said, and the key word was resonate. It's not that hard to create change when something resonates deeply with people. They believe in it. The same feeling that all of you have in this room right now, if it's done right, I think all the teachers in a building start to feel that. And they see how impactful that work looks like in a classroom, and what they're getting from their students, and what they're unearthing. And that leads to one wonderful conversation after another. So the change process is just something that is so ongoing. I mean, there's an infinite quality to this, because there's an infinite quality to learning. And it's very empowering for staff members to be part of something like this, because they then become researchers. They're researching all different things all the time, driven from their passions, and they're being supported with it because it all ties back to our original vision and purpose. I'm not sure what else I would say about it. I think it's been magical, and we just continue to go deeper and deeper. So, and I thank everybody on the panel who's helped contribute to my learning, and to Ron, who's done such a magnificent job with this as well. The Oscar goes to.
And I just, I'm gonna share my story a little bit about how I came to the elementary. I was a high school math teacher in Clarkston for a long time, and 16 years, and became an assistant principal there at the high school, and there was an elementary opening, and Dr. Rock had come on board. He was brand new, and I just kind of thought, I think I'd like to love on little ones. I think I could do this in my head. This is what I'm thinking. So, I applied, and I'd like to thank Dr. Rack for hiring me. And so I came to elementary, and I remember walking in. I did not know a soul in this elementary building, and the story of Springfield Plains was there was an administrator there that had been there for 14 years, and she started the school, and she was a former nun, and she led that building just, it was her life, and this is the way it's gonna be, and we don't hang up anything that's not perfect, and we will be the best. And she was just very driven, and those teachers responded to her. They just followed her rules, and unfortunately she passed away suddenly to the staff. It was very hard on that building. They brought over a former principal, and she retired, so it was kind of like this new beginning for all of us, because here was this new principal. They did not know me, I didn't know them, and then we're gonna start this COT. And I didn't even know what a special was. What's a special, and so they were so kind to me, right? I didn't know what that art was called a special.
It is
So, they were very kind to me in terms of, here's this person who's coming in to be our principal, and we're gonna learn together. So it was just like the timing to me was perfect because I was learning elementary and they were teaching me elementary, and then we're gonna embrace this culture of thinking. So I will never forget the start with Ron and coming to our board office with all these schools, and we brought a teacher leader, and I didn't know who to pick because I didn't know my teachers, so I just said, hey, can you go with me? And and Matt said, sure, I'll go with you. And so it was all about messaging, and it was kind of a new start for me about, what kind of messages do we send in this school, and what do we value? And we had to go into this other school, Matt and I did, and it wasn't in our district, and we did a ghost walk. And Ron challenged us to say, what kind of messages are we picking up on these walls? What is important to this school? And that was the drive for me to start with culture, because there was this sign when we walked into this elementary, and it simply said, this is a place where children are loved. And I was like, man, look at that. That just means a lot to me. As anybody walks in this building, this stands out to them. And so we put up this, we brought it back to staff, we had debate over it, and we voted, and anyway, we ended up with this big sign, and it said, it matters that you are here. So I liked that feeling of, I don't care who you are, when you walk into my school, you matter, and I'm here to serve you and to help you, and we certainly are so thankful to have children. And that's another thing, elementary still wows me, is that, look at the difference between a kindergartner and a fifth grader. I mean, you will never see this transformation again, ever, in a building. You walk the halls of a high school, and I don't know who I'm talking to, whether it be a 10th grader or a 12th grader. They look different, they don't look different, they don't sound different. Wow, so then it's like, oh my gosh, my job is so important. When I look at these kindergartners and they become fifth graders, and in fourth grade they're speaking to research, and in kindergarten they're just putting two letters together and making the BR sound together. I mean, it's just, I don't know, I just love it, and I love my responsibility, and I have to do what's right for kids, and learning has never looked better, so it's just very nice to be a part of it.
So let's throw it open to questions. Tonight you've heard a little bit of their stories and background. What things are you curious about in terms of how they got to where they are? What tips do you want to pull out of them for yourself?
How do you fail forward? What's a good example of failing forward?
If you read the latest book,
Yeah.
I talked about
Yeah.
one of my personal failures with staff members, because I feel like you have to always be modeling and saying, I won't ask you to do something that I won't do. So I incorporated all the thinking routines into staff meetings, into professional development, into just the way that I live. And early ones were complete disasters because I didn't provide enough prior knowledge for people, and if you don't do that, it's not going to work. So what I learned was placement of the routine is essential to the success of it. And time again, teachers had that idea of, I hate this routine, it didn't work, until we did kind of an autopsy on it and said, so let's look at what you did, and then we realized it wasn't the routine. It was absolutely where you had placed it that made the difference. I think that's a big learning piece for everybody. And I wouldn't save you from the failures, because we learned a lot from our failures, a lot. Anybody else with that one?
I think there have been times when we have lost our focus temporarily. Like I remember as at one meeting of our Cultures of Thinking sort of liaisons and leaders from the building, and we're talking about something, and they said, are we still a culture of thinking? And I thought, oh my goodness. So then I had, that was about in November of one year. And I remember I was talking to Nancy about that, and I'm like, oh boy, we gotta stay on message and keep saying that we're gonna do other things, but this is always who we are. We're a culture of thinking. So we have to keep reminding ourselves of that and keep working toward it and keep talking about it, keeping focused on it, always.
Well, I was gonna ask, we were chatting about this, maybe you've intimated it, I'm not sure, but was this, so we were talking about how to start something like that, whether you start slowly or making it a mandate, and at first I thought, ooh, a mandate, nobody likes that, but it sounds like it was somewhat of a mandate, and I wondered if you also have every teacher invested in it, so those 2 questions.
I don't think it started that way in Clarkston. I think it was, let's bring principals and a teacher leader together and let's kind of hear what, Ron is gonna share. And it was a very easy sell, a buy-in for us. It felt right, it looked right in our classrooms. And I think over the years, as we've become more engaged in a COT, you know, Dr. Rock speaks to it now, and so it just kind of, this is who we are, this is the expectation, and I don't think it's been a fight by any means. So it was never, you will do this,
Okay.
it was just something we did.
Wow.
And ours was very democratic as well. We decided as an entire staff to do it. It wasn't me coming in saying this is what we're doing. We actually looked at many different pieces out there and directions in which we might wanna go, and we never vote. I'm not a big believer on voting. It's like, let's come to agreements. And so we all made agreements around it, when we decided to move forward with it. And we've been happy with it as a result of that.
What kind of groundwork did you lay for that?
Research, work, taking a look at ideas, a lot of reading, going up to Saginaw.
Which the teachers did also, the people
Yeah,
who
I would
were
bring
gonna
teams
kind of
with
come
me,
to
and the
agreement,
teams
they
would
all went
report
with you?
back. You can't take the whole staff, but I brought a lot of people, and then we started participating in it. And then we tried and we created a culture where we like you to take risks. And that's very hard. It's very hard for people who, well, we've talked about that all day, the reasons that get in the way with that.
But I wanna balance that with a description of the structures of what they're talking about. Because I think underneath some of that is also a stance about starting small, even though it was a large district. And so this idea of coming to a foundation seminar with Ron was a principal and just 1 or 2 teacher leaders. And then if you were interested in continuing, and in these contexts, this is what we're doing, the teams grew to a principal and a team of 6 teacher leaders, 6 to 8 teacher leaders, right? So you took that core first conversation and kept taking that back, and then grew the team to and that was very intentional by the collaborative design here to message the idea that it's not training and you don't take everybody, and this is what we're doing, but how that grew, I believe, made a difference in the depth of the roots and the sustainability of it. And so it grows over time. And so my failure forward was the abuse of the cultural force and environment. Because I, as the party planner for these opportunities, these seminars, let the dragon of training come at me, and I got really wimpy about saying no to how many people could be in the room. And we had a session one time that was, well, for 4 sessions, one cohort that was over the max of the room, because there was such an urgency to get everybody into the conversation, which we know from studying the cultural force and the environment and the opportunity and all those connections changes what can get learned. So that notion of small, I think, is very valuable, and small in order to grow, and to grow at the pace at which the learners are engaging. So.
And I guess I would just like to add that one of the things through our research that really stuck out to us was we'd look at a lot of programs, you know, what's out there. And my ex-soup used to say, when you hear the word program, it means there's no thinking involved. And it was the thinking and the art of teaching that really stood out here. There are a lot of great structural pieces to buildings that could be set up with one program or another, but not much talked about that, the interactions and relationships between teacher and student, like this did. The moves that are made, the way that we watch those moves, the types of feedback we get from those moves. that became kind of paramount. So put everything else away, and how do we wanna get our instruction look better? So for the first year or so, we're doing visible thinking right now, right? No, you're working on better instruction. And it took us a while to break down names and things like names of routines. That's not important. What are you really trying to elicit, from your students here? Until it became simply, this is who we are. It's our identity.
So keeping with that, would you share just what you would say to rookies? What's the next first step beyond today? Just to start.
I really thought a lot about, I want this environment, and so, I think about COT as a staff, and are we a culture of thinking? So when I bring teachers together, is it me just saying, don't forget, we have an assembly on Friday, and, I totally wanted to revamp this COT. We are all learners. I sit at the table right with them. We read, we discuss, so I like to have a conversation of learning. We journal. Could we do better? Yes. But, every year I have focused on a book. So we've read Ron, we've read Carol Dweck, Mindset. Right now we're reading David Perkins, and now I know my next book. So I really encourage as a staff, and start implementing those routines and we start modeling, and we start feeling this learning together. And hopefully that's gonna inspire them to take it right back to the kids.
And I always say you can't be a culture of thinking if you're not looking at student thinking. So if you're doing routines and you're getting information back from students, if we're really not looking at it, you just did an activity with them. That's all that you really did. What was the meaning behind it? Did it elicit the type of thinking that you were hoping for from your students? If you tried a different move, might you see different types of thinking? So Ron and I have had this discussion, what do you begin with, the routines or the cultural forces? And he wrote the book first about the routines in many ways, but if you go back to intellectual character, it's all grounded in theory. And theory's awesome, I love it. Teachers like the tool immediately. How can I start using these tools in my classroom? But it's funny, what happens is what keeps creeping back in all the time are the cultural forces. And if you had done some things different with a cultural force, you would have seen a different result. So that's what I would do. I would start using routines. I would start saying, what are you noticing? And I would say, let's look at student thinking as a whole school. We take one set of papers, there's the last protocol looking at student thinking, follow it, see what comes up. It gets very, very interesting conversations.
So it's clear that some really powerful collaboration happens when you're face to face. What does collaboration look like when you're not face to face? What tools, technologies, structures support ongoing connectedness when you're not exceeding fire code limits?
Not as much as we would like yet, in terms of exchange of ideas, but there are some beginning infrastructure for that. So those who are in the seminars with Ron, in the foundation seminars or the cohort, the secondary experience, are connected through Edmodo. And so we try to prime the pump and feed that a little bit, but as we know with lots of those tools yet, there isn't a lot of exchange there, and sometimes I think that's because people are busy with trying out the routine in the classroom and talking to the teacher down the hall about what happened, and so it's inside of the school. We also have a blog that is shepherded by the coordinator for the school tours, and so if 30 people sign up and go out to Springfield Plains for a school tour, this coordinator then also is in attendance and will write a story about the tour and what she saw there, what she heard people say, and post that as a way for people to virtually understand what happened on that tour and sign up for the next one that's going to be away in another month. And it's intended to provoke exchanges and connections, but again, not much in terms of the dialogue yet.
And that doesn't work nearly as well for me anyway. I mean, I think we've had a lot of invitations. And so it's always up to other people, I think, to go to it. So you've heard about it, what do you want to do? Do you want to come into the building? Rod's hosted dinners where we just go out and we just talk, a group who have built some of this, and we invite anybody who wants to come. I talk to these two administrators as much as I talk to ones in my own district. So we just get on the phone, we call one another, we're working on a project right now. You and I throw ideas around all the time. I think this feels different. Did learning feel different in this environment than doing it online? It does to me. I mean, and so I think that relationship piece, those conversations, that face-to-face, and the ideas build on one another, and I think the most effective way for doing that is just getting together.
There is one more. I agree, and while I strongly agree with Adam, I think that the pieces that are beginning to happen electronically necessarily require that connection. But with the new book, there is a Twitter chat that's been hosted by 2 of the music teachers in the county. So hashtag 8CULCHAT, CULCHAT. Every Tuesday night from 8 to 9, they've been taking up one of the cultural forces and having a conversation.
Andy was telling me about another one that's
No,
different.
that's the one I was talking about.
Oh, is that the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
one?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and they, as I understand it, I've only been able to dip into a couple of them, but they intend to carry on the conversation past the 8 cultural forces, past each, they've sort of taken up each chapter at a time, but I saw recently that they intend to keep that conversation going. But again, to underscore Adam's point, that stands on the shoulders of opportunity, face-to-face opportunities.
What was that hashtag 8?
8 CULCHAT, call
I
chat.
think this also kind of connects back to what the question that Julia asked in terms of, what all of you do is create a lot of different entry points for people as well too. So one of the things that Lauren and I have lots of conversations, break this mentality of the rollout. The idea that one size fits all, and to constantly, so lots of invitations, lots of different entry points, but also expectations and allowing people to kind of get their feet wet and try things rather than it's all has to go in kind of lockstep way.
In that vein, is there a systematic plan for teaching this to new teachers, or staff that came from another building, transfer staff? How does that work?
Yes, and it's my responsibility. We have a, first-year teacher this year, and, there's a lot on her plate in terms of, reading workshop and writing, and, but she's just kind of, I think, just coming in, what's helped her is just coming into our learning environment as a staff and how we play it out, and I've given her past books, and, I meet with her, we have conversations, so I don't think it takes long to, enculturate her. She's right in it, so I don't feel like they're behind, because, I just immersed her.
I feel fortunate I've got a .4 visible thinking coordinator. So the coordinator works with all the teams of teachers and me. We sit in meetings, we look at lesson design, we look at where we would put thinking routines, we look at understanding goals for what we're really aiming for. We look at through lines, which is really a large idea that we're chasing, that it's steeped in something besides learning how to tell the time, and I think that's been very effective. So new teachers who come in automatically have that time built in, and we help that grow that way. And plus, when you're in a culture, it's kind of interesting, right? The environment really shapes who you are. So you pick up on it pretty quickly. This is what's valued here. You can't hide it.
I think too, as we've grown over time, we have, one of the amazing things about it is we go out, a person who works in the central office and myself, and we'll meet with the leadership teams from each of our 12 buildings and talk about culture thinking and how it's evolving. We have a rubric, and we've asked people, we had some parents visit schools and they would say, I want my child in this culture thinking classroom, not a classroom that's not doing that. So that we felt pressure, we felt good, positive pressure to say, how are we gonna make sure that this is happening in every classroom in our school? So we ask our principals to think about that, and then to have those conversations, which we're still working on. So those things have evolved over time. We have, and I learn from each of those of what's going on in the buildings. So I wanna share those things with other principals. So they have partnerships between teachers where they count as their observations for teacher evaluation, and they videotape each other, and they work on projects. We have a couple of our buildings where 100% of the teachers have decided to participate in that. So they're sharing ideas with each other and learning from each other and being reflective with each other. We have journals that we're keeping in our schools where teachers and principals and journaling back and forth with partners. And we send a couple of our HR people out to teacher recruitment fairs, and it's a very nice thing when we have people line up for Clarkston and they know about what we're doing and they wanna be part of it. I'm not saying that's 100% true, but they know that this is what Clarkston values, and everyone who comes up, this is what they tell me about these teacher recruitment fairs at Michigan State or other places. They say, you know, we wanna be part of what you guys are doing. So I think it becomes, people know what we value, I hope, you know, what our mission is, and that we hope they're coming to us because they wanna.
Our postings even say it now, you know, when you post for positions, familiar with or understanding the concepts behind culture thinking or visible thinking. So that's become interesting. That's when we started, nobody knew.
Could you all talk a little bit about Amy's question about parents? A little bit about how you brought parents along in the process?
Okay, so when we started, I purposely brought Ron in to talk with parents, to explain the philosophy where we were moving as a staff. But that was just a first year thing. Ever since then, you know, word on the street becomes pretty powerful. And you talk about good data, we have 4 elementary schools in our district. I have 100 transfers from 3 other elementaries. So that's the best data I can ever think of, is are we watching where people are going and why are they going? And a big reason is because of the culture that's been created there around the idea of thinking. When you bring a parent in, so I would host tours. When you bring a parent in, you show them what it looks like. You bring out the actual learning and you show them the process that students have been through. It all resonates with them. I said, let me guess, when you were in school, you used to learn information, regurgitate it, move on, forget information, and that's just go like this. Of course we have. I go, wouldn't it be beautiful, you know, to be learning this way? So they do it. We also do yearly exhibitions, where the point of the exhibition is parents come in and look at perhaps a unit of learning, and they'll walk through the whole process of it, not about a final product. There's usually a final product, but we want them to understand all the steps in thinking that it took to get there. And that's probably one of the biggest moves that we make from parents.
My first year, I held a COT night, and it was in December, and what is this culture of thinking? What's happening? And we had about 100 parents come. I put them around tables, and I engaged them in what learning might feel like. I put them in a routine. The routine was centered around failure. They actually walked in with a chalk talk assignment of what do we want our kids to become. So it was all kind of tied together. I thought there was a nice energy in the room. And I think the question I get a lot from parents is the homework. Where's the homework? You know? So that's been a transition. I can't say I'm questioned a lot, and I'm certainly never approached in a negative really manner. I think they see and hopefully feel from their child what's happening. We've given them parent tips from Ron about what they can do at home to support this. Our curriculum night looks different. I kind of retitled it The New Story of Learning, and I brought all the parents together, which again was new this year for me, and I just enlightened them that learning has never looked better, and this is what we're doing in our classrooms, this is what it looks like, it sounds like. Again, just reiterating and letting them know what's happening, and again, I really like what you said, Ron, about, you know, we still hold kids accountable to some, you know, to some certain things, and it does, it eases them right down, and, but I don't think learning's ever looked and felt better.
Ron does the experience about what's the residuals of education, and if you do that with parents, they say all the exact right things. You know, I want them to be curious, I want them to be skeptical by the time they're done with school, I want them to be wonderers, I want them to be thinkers. I never hear, you know, I want them to really know the Pythagorean theory. You know, they don't mention the skills ever in that, and it really helps frame that conversation. We want the same things, it sounds like. So here's how we get to it, and this is what we do. And that, it all goes away. They're de-stressed and they're comfortable.
What's the question that you use? What do you want?
Yeah, so it's essentially
It's the
that.
same. Oh, I think we did
And
too.
Ron calls them the residuals of education, what's left over when it's all done, you know?
And we've also used, as Ron talks about intellectual character, about the red thread, and we share that with our kindergarten parents. We give each one of them a red thread, and we ask them, who do you hope your children will become? So I go to each one of the kindergarten orientations at our 7 elementary schools, and I ask them that question. I ask them to write it on a Post-it note, and then I tell them I'm putting them up in my office, and I'm gonna try, those are my hopes and dreams for their kids as well, and that I'm gonna be reflective on our partnership to make sure that their kids get there, and our kids get there, and that we have a public television station, and one of our PTA president has a TV show, and we call it The Future of Learning, and she interviews principals and teachers and students and parents and talks about the culture of our school system. And she's interviewed Ron and David Perkins, and this show's on our TV station, and so I think that's a tremendous, and she recently presented at a conference with us this past weekend in Atlanta, Project Zero Conference, about how not only do a lot of external things influence education, but how can we as educators influence our communities? What messages, what are we teaching them? It's not just saying, oh, here are all the rules you have to follow, and will you vote for our bond, and it's, what does education look like, what does it feel like, what does it sound like, what should we stop doing, you know? We're really trying to affect our community at large in terms of what they believe and think about education, so that we can go on this journey together and it'll continue, you know, long after we're gone.
That reminds me of, I'm often in conversations where the opportunity to bring up the work versus learning orientation is a conversation that seems to catch people up and go, oh. It feels like almost a paradigm shifter kind of conversation. I see it in their eyes, I see it in the conversation, where we start to talk about the story of learning, and whether it's work or it's learning, and how that shows up, the brief history of why that is, and then just to start to use that language, and that resonates with a lot of adults from their own experience and what they really aspire to for their kids.
So we'll close it up there. Thank you, our panelists.
Computer shift.
Okay.
Oh, it's still on? Oh, I can see up there, that's good, you're sorry. I think we can put it over there.
Should I move? Oh my goodness gracious.